Hello, my name is Chris Mims, and you are listening to Dope. I have another conversation today. Going to be a very interesting, very exciting conversation.
Hope so.
An old mentor of mine, Peter Ramsey. He is a writer, director, producer, storyboard artist, and avid dog lover.
One dog.
But you get, I assume you get along with a lot of other dogs.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have one in here later. But thank you so much for joining me today, making the trek all the way from the Culver City area to San Pedro. I don't know if we have any real natives listening, but that can be quite a trek. Hopefully the drive was relatively
it wasn't
decent.
too bad. Traffic was okay today. So
Yeah? Okay, sweet.
Good. My pleasure, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. I wanted to, for everyone listening, frame up this conversation because Peter and I have known each other for a little while. I want to say close to, 11, 12 years, something like that.
Maybe. Yeah, I guess so. Let me see.
Midway through high school for me.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Wow, that was fast. That was fast.
And I have seen Peter's journey. I think when we first met, Rise of the Guardians hadn't even come out yet.
Wow,
I think
seriously?
it was like going to be that holiday season,
God.
essentially.
Okay.
And I've watched your journey from your first movie all the way to being on stage, receiving an Oscar for your next. So it's just been a super inspiring journey for me as a young filmmaker and creative in general to kind of watch you navigate all of this. And just to be like super clear, I haven't gotten any like tangible favors from you in any way. We have a lot of conversations. Like I'll text you, you text me, you'll read my stuff. We'll get coffee, we'll get lunch, all that kind of stuff. And I've really appreciated all of that. I think we were at Sony at the same time, but those were both our like separate paths. You were working on Spider-Verse at the time, and I was working at Sony Pictures Dailies at the time. And we've kind of like diverged and worked at the similar places and all that kind of stuff. But it's all been like our own paths, and we meet up for this type of stuff. So seeing as I'm doing this podcast now, I really wanted to bring you on to kind of put in the forefront what this kind of conversation looks like. I feel like the current climate with social media and like this whole kind of conversation around like you are your network and your network is your net worth. And while I do agree with that to an extent, my thing has always been like gravitate towards people who you think are cool, who fit your personality type, who you think might be able to offer you something more than just like, you know, an opportunity or something like that. And I've always kind of felt that about you since we first met. And I like to stay and do my own thing and like, you know, move into the industry as I see fit, because it could just be so insane. But bring it all the way back to that. And with that context in mind, I wanted to ask, do you remember that tour when we went to DreamWorks? That was like, I think maybe the third time we had met. Do you remember that at all?
Tour.
I'm sure you've met like brought a lot of people to DreamWorks, but do you remember that at all?
Wow. I mean, no, I don't. You know, if it was honestly, I'll be honest. If it was during the making of Rise, then all that's a blur, man. Because you're like, you're churning so much when you're working on a movie like that it's like every day is just a blur of meetings and like. You look at your iPhone every day and your calendar is just like from 8:30 in the morning till 8:30 at night. It's just stacked with meetings, and you're lucky if you get a break for lunch. So all that to say, there's so much that just goes in your head and right back out. Right. So I hope it was a great time.
I kind of figured you would say that.
Remember.
It was definitely one of those things where because my dad went with us, and
Really? Wait a minute, when was that?
This had to be like 2011, I want to say, somewhere around that time.
Yeah.
Because I remember very, very vividly, because it was like my college tour, essentially. The DreamWorks lot back then was, it felt like a college campus.
Oh, yeah,
and, like, people were doing
exactly,
yoga in the lot.
great.
Like lunch was free. There was artwork on all the walls. It was like, I had started, because I probably was like 15, somewhere between 15 and 17 at the time. So I had really just started like bringing my friends onto my high school campus with a bunch of guns and like shooting short films on the weekend. But I had no idea outside of like YouTube and stuff like that how to be a filmmaker or anything like that. I'd never been on a lot, even though we were right down the street from Sony and all that kind of stuff. But that was essentially my college tour. Like I was flirting with the idea of like writing and making movies.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until we took that visit and I saw like, oh, this is what it's like behind the gates.
Right.
That was like, okay, this might be the career path.
Oh, man.
This might be the office.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of blowing my mind right now.
I think you were working on...
I kind of remember... I'm starting to kind of remember your dad. It was just you and your dad, right? It wasn't even Chris Don.
No.
Yeah, it was you and your dad. Yeah. Okay.
And I just kind of try to open myself to asking the dumb questions and just feel like, let me just ask.
That's right.
Even if I think I might know the answer, maybe saw it somewhere.
That's right.
Just ask all the questions. And after that, all the other college campuses I went to just kind of seemed expensive. But yeah, I just wanted to see if you remembered anything about that day, any questions I asked or anything like that.
Man, you know, when you say it now, it's like a little memory way back there of you and your dad being there. But like I say, it was so much in the thick of just the rush of working on that movie that.
Oh yeah, I'm
it's
sure.
Like they'll have to
don't even worry about it. I know everyone's probably looking at me like, "Oh man,"
on me to get that one out. So
yeah, no worries. But yeah, that was essentially my college tour. Like I saw that and I was like, okay, if I can go to college and work at a place like this.
Wait a minute. It's so sad that you're like, it was a pivotal moment in my life, in my journey, and I'm like, don't remember. Sorry.
It was a day of the week.
I have no idea. I don't know what you're talking about, man.
No worries. I remember, I don't know if I can mention this. Let me know if we have to cut this or not. But you were working on, I remember one of the dumb questions I asked, you were working on a movie, you were storyboarding for a movie, it was an animated movie about a dog. I remember.
Okay.
Like I had my mind blown by the campus and everything. You finally showed me your office and you showed me a few storyboards. Like, yeah, I'm storyboarding this movie now, and we'll see if it gets made.
Oh, that might have been after Guardians.
Oh, so was that after?
That might have been
then?
after. That might have been after.
I feel like it was 2011, but maybe it was a little after.
Yeah, 11 would have been before, but I wasn't working on anything else, I don't think, until after that. So.
Okay. Maybe it was after.
Yeah.
But it was around that time for sure. Like Guardians was like either on the horizon or had just come out or something like that. And you were working on storyboards for this animated movie about a dog.
Yeah, I bet it was after that, because I remember that movie. That would have been after.
Okay. And that movie I don't think ever released, did it?
No, it never got made.
That was one of the questions I asked.
Never got made.
Storyboards and like, we'll see if it gets made. I was like, yeah, but you've already drawn all
I know.
this stuff.
Yeah, you'd be amazed.
And you and my dad were just like, yeah, that's how it works.
You would be amazed. That movie was written by Noah Baumbach, who now co-wrote. He was married to Greta Gerwig. So they just recently did Barbie together. So. And he's a well-regarded director with a lot of like really good movies under his belt. So, but yeah, at the time he was working on an animated feature over there, and I was working with him. I met Greta was working on it too, I think, with him. So that was their like kind of prehistoric
interesting
collaboration before Barbie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Probably see some of that influence, their collaboration. I don't know if you saw them work together at all, but maybe some of that influences in Barbie a little bit.
In some way, shape, or form, I'm sure. I mean, you kind of like, everything you do kind of informs the stuff you do after. So
yeah. So I know due to some stuff you're working on in development, which has already been announced, you're working on a Blood Count. I'm curious, what are you listening to right now, music-wise?
What
are you listening to?
I'm listening to all kinds of stuff. I listen to everything from classical to like, hip hop to, you name it, man. For Blood Count's based in the 50s jazz world, late 50s jazz world in LA. So there's a ton of music that, I was listening to already, but thinking of the movie, I would get even more specific about what kinds of jazz, because there's totally different types of jazz. It's not all, like Kenny G or whatever, It's like, so that's a lot of late 50s kind of hard bop, they call it basically. Okay. John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, dudes kind of like that. But I listen to everything, man. I listen to a lot of stuff that Alex and Nico
they pass you you music
all the time. Yeah, all the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's a pretty wide range of stuff. I'm like, it's still, I think it's probably like a really narrow band of like whatever genre it is. Like, there's not a lot of good rock and roll to my ears being made right now. Sorry, anybody rock and roll people out there. Hip hop, there's like a narrow, like, I'm kind of like, okay, come up with something new. I'm kind of tired of trap beats. I'm kind of like, I want something like,
I understand that. I'm with you.
Give me some new good stuff. But there are people that I really love, So, I listen to all kinds of stuff.
Does it inform your writing at all, or are those two separate parts of your brain, would you say?
I mean, it probably in a sense, in the sense of like a mood or tone, feeling. I mean, that's something that you'll kind of turn to music for, to kind of help you pinpoint a specific feeling or a vibe or a mood. Definitely. I'm trying to think of anything that I'm working on now that has specific musical references to it. I mean, Blood Count's an obvious one because that's like set in that world.
That's definitely why like I wanted to see if it, because obviously with Blood Count you're dealing with a music scene and you're trying to elevate it and put a visual, pretty much a visual, attach a visual vocabulary to a genre of music almost.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
But I was curious if it affected any of your other work, because it definitely affects mine and specifically, like you said, tone. Like sometimes I'll be writing a scene, I've written it like 5 times and just tweaking dialogue and like action and all that kind of stuff. And I'll get stuck and I'm like, you know what? Maybe I just need to listen to some more music.
Yeah.
And then that song will play and like I can attack the scene in a totally different way because the tone has shifted.
I mean, it's probably the same for you as it is for me, that music gives you a feeling that it's not, the feeling is specific, but the associations that come with it aren't necessarily. It's obviously stuff from your own life. It's your own interpretation of the feeling that song creates. So I think, when you're working on something, part of what you're doing is trying to create a feeling, whether it's through writing or imagery or whatever it is. And if you can take that from a song or have a song as your as a touch point, that you can feel like, okay, this passage I wrote, that feels like that song.
Yeah.
That captures what that song makes me think of.
No, I do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think I do it a lot unconsciously all the time.
I'll try to make a playlist for anything that I'm writing. So if I'm able to, a lot of times I don't, but sometimes I'll try to be better about writing a full treatment or like a beat, outline everything. And once I know that, then I can like group all the beats by song almost, and I'll make a playlist for all of those like chunks of my
cool.
beat.
So you kind of score it before you as you're writing it. That's interesting.
And then things obviously change once you start shooting it or anything like that.
Yeah.
And you bring in all your other collaborators, but at least getting like the tone right, if I can make it feel as much like that song as possible,
100%,
then hopefully I'm heading in the right direction.
No, that's super important.
Yeah.
You have to have as much of a vision as you can going in before you start working with other people, because then it can be just too many points of view or too many conflicting ideas. So the stronger idea and the stronger sense of a vibe or feeling that you have at the beginning, that's yours, the better off you are.
Yeah. I'm curious, we've had a lot of talks about this, but you've been in animation and specifically just drawing so much for so long. Now you're finally storyboarding for something that's purely live action, and you've been doing Ahsoka, you've been doing Mandalorian. What is that transition? But then I think that the biggest thing right now for you is the Lost Ollie, which was this combination of like live action and animation. What's that journey been like for you and your perspective, moving from animation, directing at least, animation to live action? Has there been a big shift, or has it largely been using a lot of the same?
Definitely using a lot of the same tools, but the thing with me, you know, before I was ever in animation, I worked in live action for as long as I worked in animation. So I was doing storyboards for tons of live action movies and directing second unit on several live action movies. So, you know, I by the time I came around to animation, I had already had like a full career in live action. And but it's funny because those two worlds are such separate bubbles. You would think that there's more, you know, kind of interconnection between the two, but once you start working in animation, man, you're like in the animation universe. It's its own thing, and I would be amazed at how little overlap there was with what was going on in the live action world. You know, a lot of people in animation were just like, "Whoa, what's that? What are you?" Because because animation has been its own industry for so long, and it's like its own ecosystem, and the people working in it, they have tended to work in it for a long time, for like, you know, decades. So there's not and there really hasn't been that much crossover between, you know, things made in live action and things made in animation in the industry. There just hadn't been any need to. They were both kind of running on parallel tracks. So it was always kind of wild, man. I went into animation and it was almost like I just vanished from the live action world because I was so busy. I wasn't seeing a lot of the old people that I used to know, and I knew tons of people. You know, I couldn't go anywhere. Hey man, how's it going? And it was just like stepping in. It was like stepping into a whole different universe. It really was. But all that to say that because of my live action experience, I had an easier time in animation because, you know, I was coming from a pretty solid grounding in how to visualize things, how to take things from a script page, you know, and storyboard them out so in a practical way that you could actually tell the story and blah blah. So I didn't have to. There was a lot of stuff that I didn't have to relearn in animation.
Yeah,
I had to learn a lot of process stuff in animation, but not a lot about the basics of film storytelling, and that, you know, that helped me become a director in animation a lot faster than I think happened for a lot of people working inside animation exclusively. But by the time, you know, after Spider-Verse and you know, I had always planned to someday to get back into live action because that was kind of my first dream, and my sensibility. My sensibility was always more live action than you know, typical or not typical but classic animation. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't come up through Disney or animated TV like the majority of feature animation people had at the time. I think that's changing a little bit, but at the time it was all like animation all the way, and you kind of worshipped Walt Disney, and you know, this whole sort of really kind of you know, for good and bad, a little slightly culty animation mentality that I didn't really have because I hadn't been grown up, I hadn't been steeped in that atmosphere. But so yeah, coming back to live action, I was a little rusty. I was like, oh my god, everything's digital now. Look at this. But
especially shooting something like, I'm assuming the Star Wars stuff, which is all on those crazy sound stages with the LED. I don't know if you guys shot on those crazy
volume
like
stages,
12K walls.
Yeah. But it's like that's just one of those things, you know, a lot of the stuff, you know, a lot of the mystique of a live action set. There's so much gear and so many people running around, and you just have to kind of remember at the end of the day, the only thing that matters to me is what I'm seeing through the little frame.
Right.
You know, it's how am I? What do I need to tell the story? That's all I have to know. Everybody else knows all the technical details and all the, you know, and not saying you don't have to know any of that stuff, because of course you do, but what really the director's job is, you know, how do I tell the story?
Yeah.
What do we absolutely need to tell the story, and how do we do it? So so the transition back was really it wasn't that tough for me. You know, I kind of like slipped right back into it. And it's funny though, you saying that DreamWorks reminded you of a campus, because I think the first thing that I did think when I got back to live action, my first day on the set, it was for Lost Dolly, and that was like, you know, seeing all the trucks, and it was early morning, and seeing all the guys carrying the gear out and people setting up, and we were up in Vancouver, it's all cold, but I'm walking through the set and people are, good morning, sir. Hey, hello, sir. You know, typical stuff you hear on a movie set. And I was like, man, live action is like the military.
Yeah.
Animation is like college. And that's exactly what it felt like. That's kind of the difference between those two things.
Wow. That's super interesting. Because even, you know, we're shooting right now, and this is live action.
Yeah.
It's very much that. It's like we got to get the thing on the thing and make sure everything. What's the f-stop, and are we exposed correctly?
Yeah, that's right. And
it's hurry up and wait kind of mentality, and it just didn't feel like that at DreamWorks. Although I'm surprised that, I mean, maybe it's happening more now. You can speak to this, but how the worlds were so separate. Because I remember one of the questions going back to the pivotal moment in my life, but the day you don't remember.
Your life changed.
Was I was asking you about directing in animation, because that was one thing I really didn't know. We had always shot, you know, I was doing some After Effects work, but no real animation. I was like, well, what's the difference directing? He's like, it's not much big a difference. Like you set up your shot and you have your focal lengths, and it's all like, you pick your f-stop and you kind of go from there. And we have had, maybe these are just breakthrough occurrences, like, you know, Phil Lord and these guys who have done live action and animation. Brad Bird, you know, he's gone back and forth. So I'm surprised that, or maybe it's just that at that directorial level is that crossover, because the knowledge base is so open for both mediums. But maybe on the technical level, right? Maybe that was the difference on the technical level, where if you're working on animation in that pipeline, kind of below the line, it's harder to cross over. You know, I was doing animation or animating or rigging an animation, and I moved over to a live action job, and then I was like production manager. Maybe that just didn't happen as much.
No, not really, because they're so like, you know, if you're all that below the line stuff in animation, there's been enough work that honestly, you know, if you're good at this in animation, people want you to do it. You know, you can always get work, and you're like project to project to project, and there's no need to cross over unless a person has a specific opportunity. Now there's a lot more, obviously, you know, there's so many you know, live action movies now. I mean, look at the Marvel movies. There's so much animation in these big studio live action movies now that there's more crossover. But it tends to be more people on the technical craft side of animation, you know, modelers, riggers, animators can cross over a little more, I think. Lighters, people doing CG stuff. It's people on that end of it that I think end up doing more crossing over. But even then, they're kind of in the VFX world bubble, which is still pretty separate from most of the live action world. You know, that's kind of, those downstream departments are still like, you know, people on set, or, you know, it's still going to be like, what is that? What do they do? I've never heard of it, you know? So it's still kind of a different animal, but there's crossover that way. But as far as directing goes, I mean, the basics of cinematic storytelling, they really don't change that much from one medium to the other. So if you can do one, you can do the other without, you know, I'm no animation expert. I've never animated anything professionally in my life. You know, I'm telling all these amazing animators, more of this, less of that, do this, do that.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you gave me the same stuff, I'd be like, you know, what? I have no idea what to do, which is, you know, it's It's kind of hilarious, but my skills are I have a skill set that's made to do something else than literally that. So
it's about keeping that sense of perspective. It sounds like you said, like looking through the lens and being like, this is what I need to tell the story. But I did kind of want to. This is a good segue into something I wanted to ask you, which is skill set. And for a lot of, I've started learning to draw, and I've hit you up about that, I've been learning Blender and all of this stuff.
That's amazing.
And just really been inspired by animated movies, I think, more than live action movies lately. But at the same time, I keep expanding my skill set. And one of the things that I had heard even back in high school was that specialize in something. Find something that you can master, get really good at, because jack of all trades, sometimes more times than not, seems to not be able to get placed. And I kind of threw that to the wind. It's like, I'll just learn everything though. And I've learned how to gaff. I've learned how to grip, cam up. I've directed. I've produced. I've DP'd. Kind of done everything. But I have run into this issue of like, when it comes to like selling myself, I kind of get like, well, I can kind of do everything.
Right.
I won't say I struggle to be like, oh, I've mastered something. But I kind of wanted to see what your take on that was, because I know that you're an artist. You can put pen to paper, and I've seen you draw a sketch of Miles in like 10 seconds. But I know that was your gateway into the industry. It's like, I can draw. I was going to be a comic book artist, and so I can start doing storyboards. But I wanted to get your perspective on, has the industry changed at all to the point where there might be places for people who just like love the overall kind of, which is what I do. I just love the overall creation within this medium, and I just kind of learn everything, but maybe I haven't mastered one thing, versus finding that skill, getting really good at it, and using it to blossom once you kind of get your foot in the door. Is there a perspective that you have on that? Should I be just like learning to master one thing right now, or should I be learning a Blender and shooting a podcast at the same time?
It kind of depends on what you want to do. Where do you see yourself? What's your goal? Where do you see yourself ending up? For if you want to just get into the industry, have somebody else give you a job, essentially. If you want to plug into, the existing system somewhere, then you should specialize in something and be really, really good at it. And somebody, inevitably somebody's going to say, wow, that dude is really, really good at that. And let's hire him. Let's get him now before he's too expensive. And then, you will grow within the system. On the other hand, someone who has a wide, or, someone like you who's got a wide variety of skills, you should turn those to doing your own thing. If you can do all those things, then, that's something where you should be building your own projects. You shouldn't, at least however possible it is for you. And, I've told you this before, I think, make your own films. You're already a filmmaker. You already have the skills to do it yourself. So it's something that I wish I had understood better back before I had gotten into storyboarding, or it's also something I wish had been more feasible for me before I'd gotten into storyboarding. Because, before I got into storyboarding, it was pre-digital days.
That was going to be my next point. I think one of the things that drove me to kind of learn everything was the fact I had the internet. I had YouTube. Yeah. Like YouTube would teach you everything. Like I kind of grew up on like Film Riot and Freddie W and Corridor Digital, and every week they're like, here's how to do this visual effect, and here's how you draw emotion from a shot, and all this kind of stuff. And I just like drank all of it. It was like every weekend I had to like experiment with whatever was being taught to me that week. So it was kind of hard for me to just specialize in one thing, because I had to kind of like try all this stuff out, and then the next thing you know, you're like, I don't know, you get bored really easily. Like, sure, I could stay here and grind this out, or I could like push this and push that, and next thing you know, you've got like a project with kind of a little bit of everything in it. But I don't know. But
you're learning actual production skills. You know how you can make a film if you want to. You can just go out and do it. If you have a decent piece of material, you could make a film. You know how to pull it off.
But I need money,
huge.
Peter. I need to go get a job so I can get money.
We all need that. We all need that. But yeah, well, I mean, pre-digital, it was like imagine not having access to the information or the technology or the money. And the cost was like astronomically higher.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it was really expensive to make a short film that had any kind of professional quality back in those days. So it was, for me, it was cost prohibitive, and it was like, man, how am I ever gonna, you know, get into this industry if I can't get in? Because, you know, I didn't go in saying I want to be a storyboard artist someday. I went and going, I want to be a director.
Right.
And then like, shit, I can't direct anything.
How much is film?
Yeah, exactly. I can't afford to, man. It's impossible. But I could write, you know, I started writing, and I thought of a way to get a toehold in the industry, you know, professionally, so that hopefully, you know, I could learn and also, you know, climb the ladder, I guess. But it's a long time to climb the ladder, man. So I did get into the industry as a storyboard artist, and it was fantastic. It was great. But it's, you know, once you're working in the industry to make a living, and you got to keep making a living. You know, so one job flows to the next, and sure, you want to work on your own projects on the side, but they have to take a back seat because you got to pay the rent. And, you know, before you know it, 10 years has gone by, and you're like, wow, what was I trying to do again?
What page was I on?
Yeah, I'm a really good storyboard artist, but I still haven't directed anything. And you start thinking, what's wrong with this picture? Now, of course, you can go out, and you've done it. You can go out and shoot something digitally.
A couple times.
You can edit it digitally. You can like mix the sound. You can do all that stuff. And you can have like a pretty professional looking piece of work for like, you know, much less than it used to be.
My first short film was like $2,500 maybe all in.
I mean, that's like, you know, that would have been, if I could have made something for that, I would have done it. I'd be like Steven Spielberg right now. You know, I wouldn't be talking to you on this little podcast. I mean, at least I like to think that would have happened. Who knows?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, you never know.
I was like, I'm $2,500, $8,000. I'm gonna be Steven Spielberg in like 2 more years.
Yeah,
it was okay.
But you know, I mean, hey, if you keep making them, that's you know, I've told you, I think I've given you that. That's my other stock piece of advice is just don't give up.
Yeah,
just keep doing it. You know, it's the people over and over again. It's the only way I got to where I am. You know, wherever that is, and it just by not giving up. You know, or trying to always keep moving forward somehow on some front. You know, you can't make a movie. Well, maybe you're writing a script. Can't write, you know, don't have the time to write. Or maybe you're, you know, learning a new skill or helping somebody else out or you know, getting a side job doing some other project, and you meet Joe producer, you know, whatever it is, you know, it's sort of like, how do I keep moving? How do I keep moving toward what I want to do and not giving up on that?
It's definitely a love affair, and there's a threshold that you cross. I think I guess it depends on the person, but you cross that line of like, oh, I'm going to make a project and it's going to be great, and all the doors are going to open,
right.
And then realizing that's not going to happen, and be like, okay, do I love this enough to like try and fail and try and fail and try and fail, or is it something that, you know, I was hoping would open up this creative bed within me somehow once I have all the money in the world and the talent at my disposal. It's like, no, it's a love affair with this industry and with the craft.
Yes.
And that's something that I've realized at this point, now that I'm almost 30, is that I do legitimately have. Sometimes you don't even know. Yeah. You know, you have to go out there and find out if like you like doing this. That's a
super important point, because there's like, you can do it because you can do it for egotistical reasons, or you can do it because, you know, you like the idea of fame, or you like the idea of, you know, you think you're going to make a lot of money quick, I don't know how anybody.
That's what I thought.
That ain't
I'm not gonna
happening
lie.
anymore. Not the quick part, at least.
Kind of what I thought.
Not the quick part. There's a lot of reasons you can get into this business that are kind of cynical and not really are not really going to get you through it. Mm-hmm. You have to love it. There has to be something about telling stories on film. There has to be something about the process, something about the art of it that you like are in love with. That just like, honestly, you have to go a little crazy for filmmaking and movies to really be able to sustain the kind of energy and commitment that you need to eventually make it. Because if you if you're not that much into it and you're, one or two failures is going to blow you off course, then you're not going to make it.
So on that note, we're at a crazy time in this industry right now, and things are changing rapidly. We've had strikes. We've had an entire movement, pretty much. I'd say we're in a different era now that streaming, pretty much post-pandemic, streaming has put us in a different era of filmmaking. There's like French New Wave and Blockbuster and all that stuff. I think we're in a different era now. We finally kind of started to shift. As someone who's probably coming up thinking, I want to make movies. They're in their teens, they're going to high school or something. They've taken their first photography course. Where do you see the industry being in like 10, 15 years? Like, what are you falling in love with, do you think, at this point? Because for me, it was blockbusters. I came up in the blockbuster era, and I'm very lucky. I came up loving movies around like 2008. Yeah. And that's like when The Dark Knight came out. That's when Iron Man 1 came out. That's when like, you're looking at Ratatouille and, like everyone's firing on all cylinders. And not only that, but I'm a child of the internet, I would say. And like YouTube was in a really great spot like 2007, 2008. The meta was really good. It was like a bunch of these like indie filmmakers like hitting the #1 trending for doing really cool, like innovative stuff that you couldn't see anywhere else. And now we're in a different place with social media and content creation, and also with just in general the traditional Hollywood system. So what do you think that we're falling in? If you have to fall in love with this industry, where do you see it being in like 10, 15 years? Would you?
If I knew that, man.
What did you say?
If I knew that.
Your best guess.
10, 15 years, I honestly, I have no idea. Things have been changing. Things have been changing in unpredictable ways. But at the same time, a lot of things aren't changing. I think for me, one thing that really surprised me this year that I'm still trying to figure out is how Oppenheimer made that much money. It's like,
really, how so?
Because it's like, the movie's really good. It's excellent and blah blah blah. But I'm like, wait a minute. So that thing made like $1 billion. It's not a superhero movie. It's not an action movie. It's not a comedy. It's not. It's not something that you would automatically say, everybody with kids want to see it. Adults want to see it.
I think I have an answer for you, but okay. Go ahead.
And it's like, okay, it's made by Christopher Nolan, but really, how many people know who directs a movie beyond people who are really into movies? So and yet somehow, does it have to do with the whole Barbenheimer thing? Did it just like get in a weird fluke of a wave that it just seemed like a crazy thing to do for a lot of people? I don't know. It costs a lot of money to go see that movie on an IMAX screen. Yeah. So I'm like, there's something about it that somehow it happened. So I'm like, how did that happen? What's that all about? You have a theory.
I have a theory. I do think Barbenheimer is a big thing. Most of the people in this room helping me shoot this thing went to we did a Barbenheimer. Kristan, my younger brother, he did an Oppenarby. He saw Oppenheimer first, and then he saw Barbie. We saw Barbie first, then we saw Oppenheimer. But we are all film people. Like, we are legit hardcore movie people. Yeah. I think, and like I said, we're coming out of this blockbuster era right now into the streaming era. But I think Christopher Nolan he understands. I think he is that guy of the blockbuster era, this late stage of it. It starts with Spielberg, and I think it ends largely with Nolan. He's kind of that last guy who can really make a blockbuster. And he tackles genre in a way where he takes every genre. He's almost tackled every genre at this point, and he makes it a blockbuster. He did superheroes, he did spies, he did space or sci-fi if you want to broaden it. He's done thrillers. He's done kind of everything. And the biopic was his last, or I don't know if it's the last. He probably has, I know he's got something else up his sleeve. But the biopic was the next genre. He was like, I'm going to make that a blockbuster.
But
And I think he decided he was going to package a biopic as a blockbuster to people. And him being Christopher Nolan and wrapped up with the Barbenheimer thing, figured out how to make basically The Social Network, but sell it as a summer Transformers level event.
But how do you do that though?
It takes a lot of precedent for sure. I don't think that anyone could have pulled it out because you have, we come out with biopics every year, but I think that something about Nolan's style and the way that he's able to, his team or however are able to position movies where it's like, this is the event of the summer. And he's been doing the event of the summer for like the last, at least since Inception, or Dark Knight or, whatever movie. Because I think Batman Begins was solid, but like, I don't think it was like, it made $1 billion. I think it was really like.
Yeah, no, it did really, really well, but it didn't do anywhere near as well as The Dark Knight or Oppenheimer.
I think one of those.
That's what I'm, that is what I'm, the thing I've been scratching my head over the most is like, what's the, I don't even know if it's like, if you can pin it on Christopher Nolan himself. I don't know. Seems like there's something interesting there, but as far as like, trends that are going to continue 10 years down the line or
that 16-year-old, what should they be thinking about if they're going to be pursuing it and they're not going to be in the industry till they're like, I think 29, 30, 35 years old.
I think the longevity of any of this is just goes back to the real basics of story and storytelling. I don't think you can really get away from that. I think things like I tell you the things that aren't working as well anymore. Like people have like or they say they do at least have like superhero fatigue, or there's too many of these movies and sequels that feel stale. And it's like an over-reliance on franchises and formulas and people going back to the same thing just one time too many, and it's like people are tired of it, and or the idea that a formula is going to help you, like with the Marvel movies. I think when they were first starting the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it was a great innovation because the movies were doing what the comic books used to do, in that they were all connected and you could tell one big story across a whole bunch of different titles. And, you always had that in comic books, and it was really cool. To see it happening in movies was like, oh my God, I'd never seen anything like this before. It felt like a new form. Well, now they've, especially after they had their first, they did their first cycle of movies, and it ended with the big Avengers thing. Everybody's happy and satisfied. Now you're going back and trying to establish these characters who aren't as well known, but you're acting like, okay, you guys are, you're already up to speed, and you're like, it's going to be something big, but it doesn't have the same kind of weight to it in people's minds because they don't know these characters as well. People are relying on the formula and the idea that it's going to be really good by the time we get to the end because it's all going to come together. You guys know that, right? And people are like, well, but this one is boring right here. And its only reason for existence is to set up that, and it's a formula that's not working anymore. So it's you can only you get lucky once in a while and you're able to rely on these formulas or franchises, but it's the movies themselves that have to work. They have to have a level of quality. I think the same thing's happening in TV, probably, with the, all the zillions of things done in streaming. And it's like, well, there was, everybody wanted, it seemed like, wow, everybody's making all these shows because everybody wants everything all the time. And it's like quantity feels like a good, exciting thing.
Yeah.
And you can pick whatever you want because there's so much. But if none of that stuff is all that good, then you're not going to want any of it. Mm-hmm. So I think quality and going back to, well, what makes stories really work and what makes stories really good? And how do you really tell a good story cinematically? It's not just about rushing people along through stuff and it feels exciting because you're moving fast. How do you make stuff that's actually going to stay with people and keep them in a moment and really like let them live an experience in the movie theater? It's a very specific skill that you see in fewer movies now, and I think that's something that, if anybody was going to start studying film now, it's like, go back to look at real movies, read real books, read real stories, understand what it is to think cinematically and put yourself in a character's experience versus what you see on most TV shows is where you're watching things happen in front of you, but you're not experiencing them necessarily along with the characters. That's the big thing that makes something cinematic versus just content.
Piece of content, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question a little more personal? Mm-hmm. Has anything, would you say, really unfair happened to you navigating in the industry that you would say?
Hard to say.
This is canted in a way that I'm not familiar with.
Hey, I would complain. I would complain about maybe one thing. When Rise of the Guardians came out, that movie, it came out and it kind of became really famous for being like a big flop when it opened, because it was like in the run up to our release, internally, the scores are great, test scores are great, and the studio was getting all these reports from these distribution analysts, and it was going to make $1 billion and it's going to be gigantic thing and blah blah blah. None of that happened. It came up against more competition from, I think, Skyfall and Twilight were kind of opening around that time, and they released it on a day. They released it the day before Thanksgiving because they're like, we're gonna have a 5-day window over Thanksgiving, so it's gonna make all this money, not realizing that everybody's traveling Wednesday to get where they're gonna go Thursday. Thursday, everybody's at Thanksgiving, most people. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It was just a weird, weird misfires in marketing and kind of distribution on that movie. There were a bunch of things that happened to it, but if I would say anything was unfair, I would say that movie kind of got made a little bit of a pinata for problems that were going on internally and strategically at the studio. Gotcha. There was stuff that wasn't happening the right way there that this movie kind of got hurt by, and so a lot of the problems that were happening at the studio kind of got pinned on it. I mean, and so I almost hesitate to say unfair, because it's like, hey, shit happens. It's like it's a business, and business can break for in your favor or against you. That's just the way it goes, and you have to kind of take your lumps sometimes. But that one, the circumstances around it felt like, there were so many people who did so much great work on that movie that I wanted it to get more recognition for that, and it just didn't work out that way. Kind of worked out that way later because it had a second life on home video and.
No, I think it's arrived at the cult
classic
status.
Yeah.
At this point, people want Jack. People
Yeah.
people love Jack a little too much sometimes.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I know. But other than that, unfair, no. I can't, people have asked me that question, have you faced racism in the industry, or have you felt and I was like, no, not really. I mean, for me, I think one of the interesting things, in my career has been coming up through the art side of things, strictly on the creative side, and coming up, what I did as a storyboard artist. It's this weird sort of, in a way, it's a very privileged position, because a lot of times I would be the first dude hired on the movie.
Yeah,
it would be me and the director. And he'd be like, "Oh, who are we gonna cast in this? Who are we gonna hire a production designer? Who are we gonna, And you're sort of privy to a lot of like foundational things when it comes to the making of a movie, and you're also you're kind of, one of the first people who actually visualizes the movie.
Yeah.
Depending on your working relationship with the director, of course, it can be a pretty privileged position. At the same time, it's like a lot of people have no idea what you do, and you're just some little jerk drawn in a corner or whatever, So it's a weird job that seems low status and high status at the same time.
Yeah.
As a result of that, you kind of tend to fly under the radar, and so you're not running into situations where there are power struggles based around you. If I'd come into the industry as maybe a director or a producer, might have been a different story, and facing things like, whether it's, overt or covert racism or any sort of kind of gatekeeping, you don't really belong here, because, in my position, I wasn't messing with things like money or like, access to, to stars or studio power or things like that. So there wasn't, the barriers for me weren't as high or weren't as apparent. So it really wasn't until you got into
the hot seat with Rise that you started to feel that like industry canted kind of like, what? Yeah, you put all this creative energy into something, and it feels like it's not being judged on that; it's being judged on these other factors.
Yeah, but even like I said though, even then it's like, well, hey, you get in a game. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I'm still amazed that I didn't take more. I'd see reviews of the movie that even reviews that weren't so crazy about it, I'd still get a nice shout out. That's well directed and it keeps moving like this, even though the blah 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 blah. And the positive reviews, a lot of them were like, oh my God, Peter Ramsey, what a genius, and yada 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 yada. So, and even after it had this like epic flop, it still wasn't a thing like, well, that guy's never going to work. That idiot is never going to work in this business again. There was nothing like that. So I kind of like walked away from the car crash, on my own. Yeah,
I got a scrape, but
okay.
My neck's still intact.
I'll take it easy for a little while, but I'm going to get back in a car at some point.
Yeah.
And I did. So it's I have very little to complain about, when it comes to the hurdles I faced in my career, because for one reason or another, and I think most of those reasons are the path I ended up taking. I just haven't faced a whole lot of opposition that way.
I have another question for you, because one thing that I am concerned about is I'm a very my mind is always in the future. Mm-hmm. Like I've been thinking about the future. Mm-hmm. I'm almost 30 now. I know some people are freaking out, but I'm like, finally, I feel like I was, when I first started writing, I was like, man, either I'm going to be a genius, like I'm going to write something and someone's going to see it and be like, oh my gosh, you have it, right. Or this is going to be a long journey. It's going to be a long journey. I'm probably not going to direct my first thing until I'm like 30 something, yada, yada. So my whole life has largely been like, eventually I'll get there. Just keep working on it. Eventually I get there. So I'm curious, as someone who I look to when I'm like, okay, this is hopefully where my journey will go. Is like, you were on stage at the Oscars receiving your trophy for Spider-Verse. Were you able to be present there? Do you feel like you were actually there? Because I feel like I'm scared that I won't be.
Yeah.
I'm scared that it won't hit me till like after I've gotten home and I've gotten this thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just won this. I was thinking about the next thing. You know, I was thinking about surviving.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you were able to be present on that night?
Yeah, I actually do think so. It was with Spider-Verse. It was, it was a weird thing because we turned that movie in late, and the movie opened right at the end of the year. The movie opened in December, and award season. I remember we kind of handed it in a month late, and it was going to open like maybe. I'm not kidding. It was going to open like a week.
Franchise.
It was going to open like a week after we handed it in, and maybe 2 weeks. Whatever it was like there were serious questions as to whether we were going to be able to release it in time, and but as soon as I'm not kidding, man. We like finished the movie and we were all like in a coma because it had been so crazy. And it was like the very next day after we handed it over, we opened up like Variety or we look online, whatever it was, and we had already won an award. We won an award like instantly. Like it was like the LA Film Critics or the New York Film Critics. I can't remember which one, but they had seen, because we had to hand over an unfinished version to critics organizations for award season. So they were like, okay, it's not finished, but here you go. And it was like immediately we started getting like awards recognition, and we were like, "Shit, what? This is insane."
Almost the exact opposite.
And we were all, you know how it is after you finish a project you've been working on for a long time, and you're just like catatonic,
reality is different,
and it's like you're like, and we rolled right into award season, as just without a break, without even like, without a breath. We were already out there kind of, and when you're up for various awards, or when you're promoting a movie for the Oscars, for the big awards, then you're constantly going to screenings and meeting people, and like the studios have you out there like doing everything
junket
you can
after junket,
to, like,
yeah.
That's right, junkets, influencer events, all this stuff. So by the time the Oscars rolled around, we had already won enough that I think we were all feeling like, yeah, we've got a pretty good shot at I think it's gonna happen. I think we might actually take it. And but there on the night when we actually did win it, it was still like, oh my God, it actually happened. So it wasn't like I wasn't surprised like there's no way in the world we're gonna win an Oscar, blah blah blah, and we won it. I was like, I think our chances are like can't be much better. I think we're in a pretty good place. And then it's like we won an Oscar, So it was still like a huge like shock that way. But it, I was actually pretty present for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I wasn't thinking. I literally my job after finishing the movie was to promote the movie, so it wasn't like I was thinking, what am I going to do next? It was kind of like, no, I'm still in the middle of this Spider-Verse whirlwind, and we're just going. And it was, it really, honestly, it felt like an extension of production. It really felt like that because there was no break between the job of making the movie and the job of promoting the movie. I think that's what it was. Gotcha. That it felt like you had that kind of like day-to-day alertness and awareness of like, I'm still working on this. I'm still, yeah, it was it's a really strange thing, but yeah, I actually did feel like, wow, I can't believe it, all that work, and here we are. Because going into it, I was like, it's a Spider-Man movie. We're not going to get an Oscar. These kinds of, it's an animated superhero movie. There's no way it's going to get Oscar recognition, but it happened.
Well, that's awesome. I love that answer because I think one thing for me, and I know a lot of people who are, younger and like making their stuff and don't have, maybe have the confidence to make something, but don't have the self-awareness or self-love to like really experience their work and experience like it being out there is like, I would make stuff and I just put it on the internet. And if it didn't get accepted anywhere at any festival, not that I was even putting into that many, like if no one hit me up about it, I'd be like, oh, well, that happened. And I just move on. Yeah. But I think that's a good perspective to have, is like part of trying to be present when you're shooting something, when you're making anything. And I've been in some great opportunities to make stuff. I was in college shooting a movie on the Sony Pictures lot, you know, and it was just like, but when I think about it, I wasn't there. Like my mind was like not, I was just nervous and like just trying to get it done and making sure like the actors were happy and, you know, trying to finish it on time. That is being
there when you're making a movie.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so.
That is what you're like.
But like so much of it is gone from my mind, and I wish it was still there.
It was just like I can't remember that day you came to the studio.
Yeah, you were.
That's what it is. Your brain is like, you know, it's you are in an altered state when you're doing this stuff. You know, you're like, hopefully you're in a good way. You're in a zone. You know, that's how it should be. And the fact that you can't remember all of it, that's just
part of the game.
Par for the course, man. You have to like, you know, because you're gonna, you know, it'll become very real to you and present when you're sitting in the edit suite and you're going like, shit, we didn't get that shot. Oh man, what are we gonna do? We should have got that. You know, that's when the
are we gonna ask for more money or get more money to finish this freaking thing?
How can we go back and do it?
Yeah. Well, that's great advice. I think just promoting your work afterwards, knowing that that's part of the process. It's like you're gonna finish something, you might like it, you might hate it, but like part of the process is like being with it after it's born. And yes, there is like that whole like it's in the universe now. It's like it belongs to everyone else, and everyone has their opinion on it. And I can't go correcting everyone's opinion on it. But part of it is like, and what I'm trying to learn, even with this project, even with this podcast, is just like once it's out there, like be with it for a while, like get people to watch it and like give you your opinions and take your flowers where they come, instead of like cutting yourself down all the time, which is what definitely. I used to do.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to, you have to, you know, I think it goes back to taking some joy in the doing of it, you know, enjoy it while you're doing it, you know, if you can like if you can sincerely find joy in it, then the process and actually doing it can be reward enough. You know, I mean, you could be working some super boring job. You know, you could be doing something else that, you know, you have no like passion for or real interest in, you know, but the fact that you're doing this, it's like, you know, I would say that is the time to try to be there, or at least be aware of the fact that, hey, I'm doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, I don't have to like, you know, sure, I'm always going to look to the future. I'm always thinking of, you know, what's ahead, but you know, if I am getting to do what I want to do, and why don't I try to make it the best it can possibly be, you know, just for the sake of spending my time wisely, or not wasting my time, you know, because you definitely don't want to do that. You want to maximize your time, but enjoy it in the moment, you know, and just remember, this is what I want to do. Even if it's not exactly what I want to do, it's a step on the road, you know, and you can really get a lot out of trying to do your absolute best at that. Because honestly, you know, I think I was going to say earlier, you know, when you in my experiences coming up in the business, working on the creative side of things, working with creative people, when they see you really trying and putting in an effort and being sincere about it, some creative person is going to like see that and extend a hand and offer you some kind of help. Just like I'm sitting here doing this podcast. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It happened to me over and over and over again when I was like just starting out storyboarding, and these old guys who had worked in like the golden age of movies that I'd be in these art departments with, they would kind of peek over my shoulder and say, hey, do you know how to do X, Y, and Z? And they'd show me some technique, or like, you know, give me some advice, or tell me some story back from like, you know, working with Alfred Hitchcock or something like that, you know? And it's you hear all these stories about, the movie industry is cutthroat and people stab you in the back and you don't know who to trust and blah, 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 blah. maybe that's true on the money side. It probably is. On the creative side, I've found it to be very much the opposite. So, but that all comes with putting in a sincere, good effort in the moment, and not just kind of like phoning it in or kind of considering what you're doing beneath you, or, you know, it's like, if you're there and you're doing it, you know, make it good, you know, make something good. That's what people respond to at whatever level, you know. People respond to somebody who's really trying to do something well. Sooner or later they will, even if it's not every time.
Yeah.
Because, you know, even with Rise of the Guardians, you know, you were saying before, it's oh, well, that happened about you know, some of your projects. That's how I felt with that. It was like a month after that movie came out, it was like tumbleweeds, man. I was like, wow, did we really spend 3 years making that movie? What happened? It's like it didn't exist. What happened? But, you know, you kind of lick your wounds for a while, and you'll start to realize, no, it touched people. It got to people. People remember. So you just have to kind of keep going, and there's an expression I heard once. I think it's from a movie. Hold on tightly, but let go lightly. You know, while you're doing it, do it 100%. When you're done, walk away, go to the next, and you know, put your 100% into that thing.
Beautiful piece of perspective, and I'm doing my best every day. Well, Peter, thank you so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure.
I can't wait to have more of these talks, and I'm sure I hope that people get out of this as much as I usually get out of our conversations on the regular. So thank you for coming on. I'm gonna ask one more favor of you. You're gonna outro us.
Okay.
So you're gonna look into your camera over here.
That one.
You're gonna greet, or however you want to do it. My name is and this has been dope. Whenever you're ready.
Hey everybody, I'm Peter Ramsey, director of Into the Spider-Verse, Rise of the Guardians, some other stuff, and this is dope.
Smash that like button. Damn, that was dope.